The year was 2387 when everything changed. Commander Li Wan sat in his small office on Mars Colony 7, drinking his morning coffee and reading reports from across the galaxy. The coffee was still warm when the first message arrived from Earth. It was simple and normal, just a request for more food supplies to Luna Station. Li Wan typed back a quick reply and sent it. He had no idea this would be the last message any human would ever send to Earth. Across the galaxy, humans were doing normal things. On the water world of Aqua Prime, Dr. Park Mina was studying strange fish in the deep ocean. She had just discovered a new species with bright blue scales. On the mining asteroid called Rock 7, workers were digging for precious metals. Children on Nubusan were playing in the parks, while their parents worked in the tall silver buildings. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. Then the silence began. It started slowly. Earth stopped answering messages. At first, nobody worried. Sometimes the big communication arrays broke down. Sometimes solar storms blocked signals. But hours passed, then days. And still no word from Earth. Li Huan tried calling his sister on Earth. The call would not go through. No, he tried calling his old friend who worked at the Space Defense Center, nothing. Every number he tried gave him the same result, empty silence. Other colonies began reporting the same problem. Luna Station, the big moon base that orbited Earth, was not answering calls. No, the space stations that floated around Earth were quiet. Even the automated systems that usually sent weather reports and news updates had stopped working. Dr. Park Mina was the first to notice something strange in her colony. She went to the communication center to send her daily report about the blue fish. But when she got there, the communication officer was gone. His coffee was still hot on his desk. His computer was still running, but he was nowhere to be found. Searched the entire building. Then she searched the entire colony. Every single human was gone. The alien workers were still there, the tall, thin Veltari with their crystal-like skin, and the short, round Murdish who breathed water, but not one human remained. The same thing was happening everywhere. On Rock 7, the human miners had vanished while their alien co-workers continued digging. On New Busan, human families had disappeared from their homes while their alien neighbors watched in confusion. Meals were left half-eaten on tables. Children's toys were scattered on floors. But no humans could be found anywhere. Admiral Kim Juno commanded the Federation ship called Concordia. She was a Tarani, one of the ancient stone-like people who had lived in space for thousands of years. When the reports started coming in, she could not believe them. 12 billion humans across 47 worlds had simply vanished. Her ship was the first to reach Earth. What she found there made no sense. The planet looked normal from space. The cities were still bright with lights. The satellites were still working. But when her crew went down to investigate, they found empty streets and silent buildings. Cars sat in traffic jams with no drivers. Elevators moved between floors with no passengers. In New York, a huge city on Earth, they found restaurants with food still cooking in the kitchens. In Tokyo, they discovered offices where computers were still running and phones were still ringing. But no one was there to answer them. It was as if every human had simply stopped existing in the same moment. The Federation sent investigation teams to every human world. The results were always the same. Human buildings stood empty but undamaged. Human technology still worked perfectly. Human farms still grew food. But not a single human could be found anywhere in the galaxy. Some of the aliens thought it was a trick. Maybe humans were hiding somewhere, planning something clever. Others thought it was an accident. Maybe a disease or a weapon had killed all the humans at once. But there were no bodies, no signs of fighting, no evidence of anything bad happening. The Federation's best scientists studied the empty human worlds for months. They found no clues, no messages explaining what had happened. No signs of struggle or panic. The humans had simply chosen to disappear, leaving behind a galaxy full of questions and empty homes. Years passed. The other alien species began to take over the empty human worlds. The Veltari built their crystal farms where human cities used to be. The Murdish filled the human underwater cities with their own families. The Turani took apart human space stations and used the metal to build new ships. Slowly, the galaxy began to forget about humans. They became a story parents told their children, a warning about what happens when a species gives up and runs away. Museums kept human artifacts as reminders of a people who had once reached for the stars but had chosen to abandon them. The name human became another word for quitter. When young aliens faced difficult problems, their teachers would say, "Don't be like the humans. Don't run away when things get hard." But none of them knew the truth. None of them understood that humanity had not run away at all. It had simply gone somewhere else to prepare for something much bigger than anyone in the galaxy could imagine. 300 years had passed since the humans disappeared. The galaxy looked very different now. Where human cities once stood, new alien settlements grew like flowers after rain. The empty human worlds had become prizes that different alien species fought over and claimed. On the planet that humans had called New Sol, tall crystal structures now reached toward the sky. The Veltari had built their farms there, growing their crystal crops in the rich soil that human farmers had once worked. The crystal beings moved slowly through the fields, their transparent bodies catching the sunlight and throwing rainbows across the land. They had torn down the human buildings and used the materials to build their own geometric cities. Zara, a young Veltari farmer, had been born on New Sol. She knew nothing about the humans who had lived there before her family arrived. To her, the strange metal pieces she sometimes found in the soil were just junk from the past. She would throw them away and continue planting her crystal seeds. Under the oceans of Aqua Prime, the Murdish had transformed the human underwater cities into something beautiful and strange. The Murdish looked like large fish with arms and legs, and they breathed water instead of air. They had flooded the human buildings and turned them into nurseries for their young captain. Riffsinger was an old Murdish who remembered when the humans first disappeared. He had been just a young soldier then, part of the Federation investigation team. Now he was the leader of New Deep City. Built inside what used to be a human research station, his grandchildren swam through the corridors where human scientists once walked. The little Murdish played games in rooms that had once been human laboratories. They had no idea that air-breathing creatures had ever lived in these spaces. The asteroid mining stations that humans had built were now run by the Turani. These ancient stone people were excellent miners, much better than humans had ever been. They'd improved the human mining equipment and dug deeper into the asteroids than humans had ever dreamed possible. Granite Fist, who worked on the asteroid the humans had called Rock 7. He was proud of how much his people had improved the mining operation. The Turani had increased production by 400% and found rare metals that the humans had missed. Sometimes Granite Fist would find old human tools buried in the asteroid rock, would examine them with curiosity. The tools were well made but simple compared to what the Turani used now. He kept some of them in a small museum for his workers to see in the great schools of the galaxy. Alien children learned about humans in their history classes. Professor Gelmar was a famous Turani teacher who had written books about the disappeared species. He taught at the Central Academy, where young aliens from all over the galaxy came to study. His students would sit in the large stone classroom and listen to stories about the humans. Professor Gelmar would show them pictures of human cities and human technology, would explain how humans had been brave explorers, would spread across the galaxy faster than any species before them. But then he would always end the lesson the same way. Remember, he would say, the humans were not as strong as they seemed. When faced with real challenges, they chose to run away. They abandoned everything they had built. This is why we must never give up, no matter how difficult things become. The young aliens would nod and write notes in their books. They learned that being called human was an insult. If someone called you human, it meant you were a quitter who ran away from problems instead of solving them. On the trading world of Commerce Hub, alien merchants sold human artifacts in the markets. Old human computers, clothes, and artwork were popular items. Rich aliens collected human things the way people collect toys or stamps. Merchant Silkar was a successful Veltari trader who specialized in human artifacts. She had shops on 12 different worlds and employed hundreds of workers to find and clean old human items. Her most expensive piece was a human piano that she had found in an abandoned house on New Seoul. Customers would come to her shop and touch the piano keys, making strange sounds. They would laugh and say, "Imagine trying to make music with such a primitive instrument." Silkar would smile and agree, but secretly she thought the piano sounded beautiful. The galaxy had grown richer and more peaceful since the humans left. The three major alien species had learned to work together better. They shared technology and resources. They built bigger space stations and faster ships. The empty human worlds had given them room to expand and grow. Trade routes connected distant worlds in ways that had never been possible when humans controlled so much territory. Scientific research moved faster because different alien species could share their knowledge without human interference. The galaxy was doing very well without humans, but sometimes in the quiet moments between the busy days, some of the older aliens would remember the humans differently. They would remember how human explorers had been the first to reach distant stars. They would remember how human scientists had made important discoveries. They would remember how human diplomats had helped create the Federation that now kept peace in the galaxy. These older aliens would keep their memories private. In a galaxy that had decided humans were quitters, it was not popular to remember them as heroes. None of them knew that somewhere in the dark space between galaxies, the humans were still alive and working harder than they had ever worked before. The night shift at Deep Space Monitor Station Kepler 7 was always quiet. Technician Yelkus had worked there for 15 years, watching the dark space between galaxies for anything unusual. Most nights, nothing happened. The screens showed the same empty blackness they had shown for centuries. Yelkos was a young Feltari with bright blue crystal skin that glowed softly in the dark control room. She liked the quiet night shifts because she could read books while the computers did their work. Tonight, she was reading a story about ancient space explorers when the first alarm sounded. The sound was soft, but urgent. Yelkus looked up from her book and saw a red light flashing on the main control panel. She walked over to check what was wrong. The deep space scanner was showing something strange. There were signals coming from the void, the empty space between galaxies where nothing should exist. At first, Yelkos thought it was just cosmic noise. Space was full of natural radio signals from stars and planets. But as she studied the readings more carefully, she realized these signals were different. They had patterns. They repeated in ways that seemed almost like a code. She called her supervisor, Dr. Morgeth, who was sleeping in his quarters. Dr. Morgeth was an old Turani scientist who had worked in space for over 100 years. He was not happy about being woken up in the middle of the night. "This better be important," Dr. Morgeth grumbled as he entered the control room. His stone-like body moved slowly, and his ancient eyes looked tired. Yel showed him the strange signals on the computer screen. Dr. Morgeth studied the patterns for a long time, his expression growing more serious with each passing minute. "Where are these coming from?" he asked. "The void," Yelkas replied. "About 3 million light-years beyond our galaxy's edge. There's nothing out there, sir. Nothing at all." Dr. Morgeth rubbed his stone chin thoughtfully. "Run a full analysis. Check if these signals match anything in our database." Yelkas typed commands into the computer. The analysis would take several hours. So she and Dr. Morgeth waited and watched as the strange signals continued to pulse across their screens. The patterns were complex and seemed to follow some kind of mathematical sequence. When the analysis was complete, both aliens stared at the results in shock. The computer had found a match. The signals were similar to old human technology signatures, but they were much more advanced than anything humans had ever built. "This is impossible," Dr. Morgeth whispered. "Humans have been gone for 300 years, and these signals are coming from outside our galaxy." Over the following weeks, more monitoring stations across the galaxy detected the same strange signals. The Federation's top scientists were called in to study them. They worked day and night, trying to understand what the signals meant. Dr. Ref Current was the galaxy's leading expert on human technology. She was a brilliant Murdash scientist who had spent her career studying the machines and computers that humans had left behind. She had written books about human engineering and was considered the greatest authority on how human technology worked. When Dr. Reef Current first saw the signal patterns, she could not believe her eyes. "These are definitely based on human technology," she told the Federation Science Council. "But they're evolved far beyond anything we've ever seen. It's like comparing a child's toy to a starship." The signals were getting stronger each day. More patterns appeared, and they seemed to be moving closer to the galaxy. The Federation's best computers tried to decode them, but the mathematics was too complex. Whatever was sending these signals had technology that was centuries ahead of anything in the galaxy. Fear began to spread through the Federation worlds. If something was approaching from the void using advanced human technology, what did that mean? Had the humans really disappeared? Or had they gone somewhere else and built something terrible? General Stoneheart commanded the Federation's military forces. He was a tough Tyranny warrior who had fought in many battles. But these strange signals worried him more than any enemy he had ever faced. "We need to prepare our defenses," he told the Federation Council. "If something is coming from the void, we must be ready." The Federation's war fleets began to gather. At the galaxy's edge, thousands of ships from all three major species formed a defensive line, but they had no idea what they were defending against. On the remote research station where Yelkus worked, the signals were now so strong that they interfered with normal communications. Dr. Morgeth had brought in a team of expert codebreakers to try to understand what the signals meant. Late one night, a young Veltari mathematician named Crystal Mind made a breakthrough. She had been studying the signal patterns for weeks when she suddenly realized something important. "These aren't communications," she announced to the research team. "They're not trying to send us a message." "Then what are they?" Dr. Morgeth asked. Crystal Mind pointed to the mathematical equations on her screen. "They're navigation beacons. Something big is using these signals to find its way through the void. And whatever it is, it's heading straight for our galaxy." The news spread quickly through the Federation. Something was coming from the dark space, between galaxies. Something that used technology based on human designs, but far more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and it would arrive in less than 3 years. The first ship appeared without warning above the planet, Centauri Prime. Captain Stoneshield was drinking his morning tea in the command center of the Federation patrol station when every alarm in the building started screaming at once. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. His communications officer, a nervous young Veltari named Sparkvoice, was staring at her screen with wide eyes. "Sir, there's a ship, a huge ship. It just appeared out of nowhere." Stoneshield looked at the main display screen and felt his Stoneheart skip a beat. The ship was enormous, bigger than any vessel he had ever seen. It was at least 10 times the size of the largest Federation battleship. But what shocked him most was its design. The ship looked human, not exactly like the old human ships from 300 years ago, but the basic shape and style were unmistakably human. It had the smooth curves and elegant lines that human engineers had always preferred, but this ship seemed to be alive somehow. Its hull appeared to flow and shift like liquid metal, and strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Send a message to Federation Command," Stoneshield ordered. "Tell them we have a situation." Before Sparkvoice could send the message, more ships began appearing. They materialized out of empty space one by one, each one as massive and impossible as the first. Within an hour, there were hundreds of them floating in perfect formation. Above Centauri Prime, the Federation's emergency response fleet arrived 6 hours later. Admiral Deepcurrent commanded 12 of the Federation's most powerful warships. She was a veteran Merdesh officer who had fought in the border wars against space pirates, but she had never seen anything like the fleet that waited for her. The human ships, for they were clearly human in origin, moved with a grace that defied physics. They flowed through space like schools of fish swimming through water. Their formations were perfect, as if each ship knew exactly where every other ship was at all times. Admiral Deepcurrent tried to scan the ships with her sensors, but the readings made no sense. The ships seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Parts of them appeared to be there and not there at the same time. Her best scientists could not explain what they were seeing. "Open a communication channel," Admiral Deepcurrent ordered. "All frequencies." Her communications officer worked at his controls for several minutes before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Admiral. Can't get through to them. Whatever technology they're using, it's beyond our equipment." For 3 days, the human fleet remained. Silent, they did not respond to any attempts at communication, did not move or attack. They simply waited in their perfect formations, as if they were expecting something. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. The largest ship in the human fleet, a vessel so huge it could have housed 1,000,000 people, suddenly began to broadcast on all frequencies. The voice that came through the speakers was clear and strong, speaking perfect galactic standard. "This is Admiral Chohanna of the Human Transcendent Fleet," the voice said. "We apologize for our long absence. We have returned to honor our promise to the galaxy." Admiral Deepcurrent nearly fell out of her command chair. She knew that name. Every student of galactic history knew that name. Admiral Chohanna had been one of the greatest human military leaders. She had commanded the human fleet that had helped establish the Federation 300 years ago. But that was impossible. She should have been dead for centuries. Admiral Chohanna, Deepcurrent replied, her voice shaking slightly. "This is Admiral Deepcurrent of the Federation Defense Fleet. We thought all humans were gone. Where have you been?" There was a long pause before the human voice answered. "We did not abandon the galaxy, Admiral. We left to prepare for what is coming. The Devourers are approaching. They will reach the Galactic Rim in less than 3 years." The Devourers. Deepcurrent had never heard this word before. What are the Devourers? "Entities that consume reality itself," Admiral Chohanna explained. "They have already destroyed 17 galaxies in our local cluster. They leave nothing behind. No matter, no energy, no space, no time. Only empty void." The communication channel filled with other voices as Federation officers from across the galaxy listened to the conversation. The idea of something that could destroy entire galaxies was terrifying beyond imagination. "We discovered them during our deep exploration missions," Admiral Chohanna continued. "Our scientists calculated that they would reach this galaxy eventually. We had a choice: stay and fight with our limited technology, or evolve into something capable of stopping them." "Evolve?" Admiral Deepcurrent asked. "We transcended our purely biological nature while maintaining our essential humanity," the human admiral explained. "It was the only way to develop the technology needed to fight the Devourers. We spent 300 years becoming what we needed to become." As if to demonstrate, the human ships began to change. Their hulls flowed like water, reshaping themselves into new configurations. Weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously extended from their sides. Energy fields that bent space itself surrounded each vessel. "We have returned to offer you a choice," Admiral Chohanna said. "Join us in defending reality itself, or face the Devourers alone. But know this: traditional weapons and defenses are useless against them. Only transcended technology can harm them." The galaxy that had written off humans as cowards now faced an impossible decision: trust the species they had forgotten, or face the end of everything they had ever known. The massive human ship called the Eternal Dawn slowly moved toward Federation's central station. Every alien in the galaxy watched on their screens as the impossible vessel approached. The ship was so large that it cast shadows across the entire space station. Admiral Deepcurrent stood in the main docking bay, her hands shaking slightly. Behind her stood representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The Veltari Council had sent their wisest crystal beings. The Tyranni had brought their strongest stone warriors. Even the mysterious energy beings from the Outer Rim had come to witness this moment. When the airlock opened, Admiral Chohanna stepped through. She looked exactly as she had 300 years ago, tall, strong, with kind eyes and graying hair. But there was something different about her now. She seemed to exist more fully than the others around her, as if she was more real than reality itself. Behind her walked Captain Moon Taeyong, her aide. He was young-looking, but his eyes held the wisdom of centuries. When he moved, space itself seemed to bend slightly around him. "Welcome back," Admiral Deepcurrent said, though her voice was uncertain. "We have many questions." Admiral Cho Hanna nodded. "I'd understand your confusion. Let me show you what we discovered." Captain Moon Taeyong activated a device that created a holographic display in the center of the docking bay. The image showed the dark space between galaxies, but it was not empty. Massive shapes moved through the void, things that hurt to look at directly. "The Devourers," Admiral Cho Hanna explained. "They are not alive in any way we understand. They exist to consume reality itself. They eat space, time, matter, and energy. When they finish with a galaxy, nothing remains, not even the memory that it ever existed." The hologram showed 17 empty spots where galaxies had once been. The alien representatives stared in horror at the absolute nothingness. "How do you fight something like that?" asked General Stoneheart, the tough Tarani. "Military commander." "You can't," Admiral Cho Hanna replied. "Not with normal weapons, not with normal technology, not with normal biology. It had to become something more." She gestured to herself and Captain Moon Taeyong. "We are still human, but we exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We can touch reality at its deepest levels. We can create and destroy matter with our thoughts. We can travel through space and time as easily as you walk through a room." Dr. Reefcurrent, the Meritish scientist who had studied human technology for decades, swam forward in her water-filled mobility suit. "But how? How did you change yourselves so completely?" Captain Moon Taeyong answered. "We learned to let go of our physical limitations while keeping our human hearts and minds. It was not easy. Many of us were afraid. But we knew that if we failed, not only would humanity die, but every living thing in the galaxy would be consumed." Admiral Cho Hanna activated another part of the holographic display. It showed human ships fighting the Devourers in the void between galaxies. The battle was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Weapons that existed in multiple dimensions struck at enemies that were made of pure destruction. Reality itself twisted and bent as the two forces clashed. "We have been fighting them for 50 years, Admiral Cho Hanna said. "We have learned their weaknesses. We have developed weapons that can hurt them. But we cannot win this battle alone. There are many of them, and they are too strong." The alien representatives looked at each other with fear and uncertainty. The idea of transcending their physical forms was terrifying to most of them. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" asked Crystal Mind, the young Veltari mathematician who had first decoded the navigation signals. "We offer you a choice, Admiral," Cho Hanna said. "Those who wish to remain as they are may do so. We will defend them as best we can. But those who choose to transcend, to become more than they are now, can join us in this fight." "Is it safe?" asked Professor Gelmar, the old Tarani teacher who had spent years telling his students that humans were cowards. Captain Moon Taeyong smiled sadly. "Nothing about this is safe. Transcendence changes you completely. You become something new, while trying to remain yourself. Some of us lost our way during the process. Some became too different to be called human anymore, but most of us succeeded." Admiral Cho Hanna stepped forward and placed her hand on Professor Gelmar's stone shoulder. "You taught your students that humans were cowards who ran away. I understand why you thought that. But the truth is, we ran toward the greatest danger we could find. We spent 300 years preparing to face the end of everything." The old teacher's eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong about your people." "No," Admiral Cho Hanna said gently. "You were right to be angry. We left without explanation. We let you think we had abandoned you. But we could not risk the Devourers learning about this galaxy before we were ready." Over the following months, volunteers from every species began the transcendence process. It was difficult and dangerous, but thousands succeeded. They became beings of pure energy and thought, while keeping their original personalities and memories. The galaxy that had once forgotten humanity now worked alongside them. Human technology merged with alien wisdom. Transcended beings fought next to traditional warriors. The greatest fleet in galactic history assembled at the rim of known space. when the Devourers finally arrived, found not a helpless galaxy, but a united force ready to fight for the very existence of reality itself.